Good morning, everybody. Welcome at the Berlinale Talent Campus 2012. Great event for emerging filmmakers, where young filmmakers meet established filmmakers to discuss about their work and to exchange experiences. This morning we focus on the art of interviewing. Look Who's Talking is the session called this morning. And we're going to speak with, we have two distinguished guests from completely different backgrounds. Film critic and film director Mark Cousins, whose film, The Story of Film, is screening this year at the Berlinale Special. And we have actor turned producer and also interviewer in the film Side by Side, Keanu Reeves. Please welcome on stage your moderator of today, Peter Cowie.
Good morning. Well, the first guest I'm going to ask on stage is an old friend of mine, Mark Cousins, who I met in the early 90s when he was directing the Edinburgh Film Festival and was innovating lots of things at that event. And then he began a series for television in Britain called Scene by Scene, which did some very provocative interviews with directors and stars, Rod Steiger, Roman Polanski, David Lynch, and so on. And then, as Matthijs said, he's done this Story of Film, and we'll hear how he created these 15 hours of footage. So please welcome Mark Cousins. Thank you. Sit down. And then our second guest, of course, Keanu Reeves, broke through with so many films in the early 90s, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Point Break, Speed, of course, and then the Matrix films. But we mustn't forget he was also in some very intimate films like River's Edge and My Own Private Idaho. And now he's come to the Berlinale in the role of a co-producer and interviewer. So please welcome Keanu Reeves. Oh my God. Great start.
Thank you.
Keanu, this represents a big change of pace for you. I mean, you're not walking up the red carpet with a big Hollywood movie. You are here with a film that you clearly believed in passionately about the transition from celluloid to digital, a specific subject. What made you do that? What brought you to that?
It started, I guess, I was working on a film called Henry's Crime, and I was acting in it and had developed the script, and we were in the post, and we were doing, there's a moment in time when you take the photochemical, then you scan it, and you do the digital intermediate, where you do the color correction. And once you finish that, then you take your photochemical, because you have to make a negative, and you match the photochemical to the digital image. And you do it in the DI suite, and you have the digital image which you've color corrected, and you have your photochemical, and they're side by side, and then you try and match them. And so what happens is you have this digital image that you can manipulate in so many different ways, and then you have a photochemical image which is not as flexible, let's say. And behind me, or in front of me, was the colorist and the timer. And they were side by side. And then there was the DP who was doing the color correction, showing me on a 5D camera. He had an image that he had taken that he'd used in a commercial, and he was like, look at this great image. I'm gonna do a commercial. And I'm like, okay, and we can do this in movies. And I'm looking at this thing on this camera, and he's going to use that in commercials and films. I'm looking at this, digital, this photochemical film I made, which is turning into ones and zeros. And I'm hearing about all of these different digital cameras. And I'm thinking, film is dead. I've been going through the process, and I was looking at the labs, and I was thinking, wow, we should talk about this. We should find out what is going on in this moment of time. And the post supervisor on it, Chris Keneally, who's here today, the director of Side by Side. Where are you, Chris? There you are in the front row. we were side by side, and we were like, let's try and do something with this idea. And he was like, yeah. And so we kind of shook hands, and we were like, let's go forth and just start to see who we could talk to and cover this moment in time.
As a little aside, it sounds like a bug's life here. Could you possibly stop taking pictures now, because it's really like it's a background, jungle fever. Mark, your route to the story of film, was that a similar one? As I recall, you did a book version of it, 2004, but obviously the book wasn't 15,000 pages. This is a much more ambitious version.
Yeah, I wrote the book in 2004, as you said, and I just wanted to write a passionately international, accessible history of the movies, particularly this luminous, flickering medium. You know, I remember once interviewing Lauren Bacall, and she said, you know, the industry's shit, it's the medium that's great, and that was so true. So I wanted to do a history of the medium, not the showbiz, not the paps, or not your paps, but I just wanted to do something about the brilliance of the medium, and so I tried to tell the story of innovation in the movies in the book. And then my producer, who I think is here today, said, why don't we make a film? And I said, you're nuts. And he is nuts, but we made it, and it's 15 hours, and there are 1,000 film clips in it.
And it was shot for the big screen.
Yes, it was made for the big screen, shot and cut for the big screen. You know, when you're making any film, you have to find a style. And what I wanted to do is try and use an old, like, magic lantern style for this. And so all the images come in from the right, as if it's an old Victorian slide. There are no camera moves in the whole 15 hours of the stuff that we shot. No reverse angles. And we shot a lot at dawn and dusk, just to sort of maximize the luminosity of the image.
Well, we've got quite a few clips, so we're going to show a clip first from Keanu's film Side by Side, and I think when we've had it, we can talk about what you can tell us about those particular interviews that you did. So could we have the first clip, please? Each interview seems to have been done in a slightly different style, a slightly different way. The setup is different. Sometimes the camera's moving, sometimes it's still. That was obviously deliberate from the start to give us sort of vary.
Yeah, we were basically a two-camera team, and we would have a camera on the subject, and we'd have one camera that was kind of floating.
Were they all done in LA, or these interviews?
No, we were basically kind of guerrilla. You know, once we had that idea, that agreement between Chris and I to go out and investigate this subject, and we started with, it's such a broad idea. I mean, its implications are so broad. You know, the end of film, and we saw a little piece there about archive, and I wasn't that aware about the archiving situation, and you know that started to come out from speaking to people.
Well, Scorsese has spent a lot of his own time and money on restoring pictures which are decaying, particularly color pictures of the 50s, for example.
And there's YCMs and the OTS, and anyway, but so we basically started with that, and then it would depend on who we were speaking to in the sense of how much time did they give us. You know, we would always have a list of questions in a biography, and as the subject started to develop, as I'm sure you experienced, it takes you down these other paths, and then someone will say, well, what about that? You know, and you follow it, and then you know, I mean, with the archive, we kind of went, oh, right, archive, you know, and then dealing with, you know, getting into editorial, and I knew George Lucas was very important in digital, but I didn't know how important. Sound, projection, editing, the high definition camera, visual effects.
He's interviewed in the film, isn't he? He's interviewed, but we don't have a clip with him. But
I'm sorry, this is about interviewing. But so I'm sorry, I don't know about the subject. But with that came this premise, and then I was fortunate enough. I mean, people love to talk about, if they agree to the interview, to share their passion and their thought. You know, and I think I was really lucky to have people who, on this subject, we're very open. And, with Chris, with his interviews and my interviews, people wanted to talk about this. And that makes your job easier. It wasn't like if you had to interview me, which was like...
Yeah, but access is important. There's no doubt that those people spoke to you in the way they did because you are you. I think if a journalist from the LA Times had come along, they would not have given the same access and they wouldn't have been so relaxed in talking.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. I mean, a lot of people I had met before or had worked with. And yeah, I mean, I've been around for a little bit. So.
I'm happy you had Richard Linklater because I think about 4 years ago we had a Scanner Darkly here in the Berlinale, and it was a very unusual picture. It was clearly a truly experimental film that worked very well for me. Mark, could we go to your early days of scene by scene? And one of the scene by scenes from which we're going to have a clip is of
Rod Steiger.
First movie. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Okay, but I was going to say it was about Rod Steiger, but before we will be showing a clip about the Iraqi kids. But thinking about interviewing technique, how did you hone that and perfect it? Because when I first met you, you were at Edinburgh, and that was a new thing for you to talk to people, I guess, on stage at the festival, and then from that you went to television?
Yeah. When I left the Edinburgh Film Festival, I was offered an interview show on the BBC, but they wanted it to be full of like anecdotage and the old stories again and again. And I said, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't know how to do that. But I said, if we could focus on the work, then I would do this interview show. So what I would do in each case is choose 10 scenes from the filmmaker's work, whether it was Roman Polanski or David Lynch or Lauren Bacall. Just choose those 10 scenes, suspend a screen between the interviewer and me, and then we would watch them together. And I would have edit control so we could stop and slow-mo and just talk about the imaginative process and the craft process behind each scene. That was a way of focusing the conversation and putting the subject visually in the room between us, as it were, rather than doing something more chatty, and I just wasn't a chatter, I thought. So that's what we did.
And by the time you made the film we're going to have a clip from now, the first movie,
yes.
It's clear that you're very relaxed behind the camera and you're allowing your subjects to talk and to go on talking if they want, without really charging in and interrupting them all the time.
Well, the reason I've chosen this clip is that I noticed, I love international cinema, and I noticed that in the Western world, which is quite an individualistic world, it's often what we call the talking head. It's the single person talking. Whereas if you go to the Arab world or the Southern Hemisphere in Indian cinema, you get, instead of the talking head, the talking group. And so the camera stays wider and you've got 6 or 7 people in the shot. And what's fascinating for the interviewer, you're still pitching questions, but you're pitching them at a group, and people then interact within the shot, and a conversation emerges out of that. So are we going to see the Iraqi thing? So this is a clip where in Iraq, in a village, with children who had never seen a film before. So out of my bed sheet, we stitched up a big screen, projected films, and then the next morning I met them, and this is the moment where I meet them, and they don't know that I'm about to give them flip cameras, the tiny little flip cameras, and ask them to make their own films. So this is the morning after these kids have seen a movie for the first time.
What movie did you show them?
I showed them 5 films. I showed them a brilliant Danish film called Palla Alone in the World, about a little boy who wakes up to find there's no one else in the world. A brilliant Iranian film called The Boot, about a little girl who's looking for a boot. A brilliant East German film, a DDR film called Singing Ringing Tree, and a certain film called E.T., which everyone has seen. and The Red Balloon, the Ballon Rouge also, of La Maurice.
Can we have the second clip then, please? Thank you.
I think what's interesting there for us as filmmakers, is that you just sort of set it up and then let it go, and you see the evolution of it. So he says a dog, a donkey, and a goat. Somebody else says love. In a moment, I think then he says, He takes his original idea about the donkey and make it fall in love, so you can see them interacting, you know. But it's hard as a filmmaker. I was shooting this as well, so you're trying to just see where the action is. You're trying to frame out the little boy he's always in, and you know. But it's wonderful, that exhilaration.
Did you do many takes, or was it? Or
No, that's
just
one take.
Just one take.
Yeah, no cut, as you see.
And it worked well. Yeah. Did you do your own camera operating?
I started doing it here in Iraq. It was quite hard to get a DP to come with us because it is a slightly scary bit of the world. But I chose a place that was so splendidly beautiful that it was hard not to make the imagery look nice. And also, Timo Langer, my editor, came with me to check that it was in focus, because it's nice to be in focus.
Was that which year was that? Was that because you were outside the green zone, obviously?
Three years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Keanu, how did you come up with the people you did to interview them? Did you make a list, a wish list, and then you presumably were turned down by some because they might have been shooting a film or busy, and then others?
Yeah, I hate that part.
Yeah.
No sucks.
How did you establish that list?
The list was generated from basically from the topic. You know, so if it was a technical side, we started with Technicolor in New York. And then we went to Camera Image in Poland, to the film festival there.
For DPs, yeah.
Yeah, for all the cinematographers were, and we kind of bum rushed them. Yeah. And then from there, it was just trying to think of the filmmakers who we thought were involved and who were, shot photochemically and digitally. And then we went to Christopher Nolan, who had never shot digitally, to get a kind of filmic side. But yeah, there was basically a kind of, we started with the list and then it grew.
Right. And Soderbergh's used all kinds of technologies, hasn't he? He's always wanting to do things cheaper and faster and so on.
Well, yeah, but he's very hands-on. I mean, he shoots the films, he edits his films. He's kind of a one-man band now.
And does about 4 films a year.
Yeah, and then does like...
I saw one in Venice, I saw another one last night. There's another one about a male stripper in Mississippi coming up, and then I saw in the trades they've sold yet another one. So there's 4 in a 12-month spell.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. But it's good. But yeah, that's basically how we started.
And how long did that...
What was their favorite film? Did they ever react?
Yeah, they absolutely loved the Iranian film. And they loved it. They've all got bicycles, so they loved it when in E.T. when the kids go across the moon.
Yeah.
Did you talk about, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Side by side, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, so were they, because there's some kind of element there about storytelling.
Yeah.
That comes out from that.
Yeah. This is the part of the world where 1001 Nights emerged, so there's an incredibly rich tradition of the mythic storytelling, the dreamlike storytelling, the unending story, the story that leads to another story. So the kids turned out to be very good at storytelling. It was slightly annoying, I have to say, and I've said this before, that I've been making films for 20 years, and when they finally delivered their little films on flip camera, they were better than anything I would ever made, which was actually rather annoying. They could have at least been rubbish, but they weren't children good. So I went off them at one point slightly.
Could you ever make a film of their films?
Yeah, their films are all in my film. So it starts as me, the filmmaker, but then we start to cut in their films, and it becomes theirs after that.
That's great.
But I think there's a correlation to what we see in these 2 interviews and with the filmmakers, and maybe it's the nature of storytelling, that carries through the development of the wonder of the child, and these kind of, and absorbing what we've seen or what gets communicated to us. And when we decide to tell these stories, and this is behind and in front of the camera, I think from the technical side, and also, from the performance side. But we kind of act out these thoughts, these feelings that we have that are collected, and the universality that comes out is constantly, I don't mean to have a Joseph Campbell moment here, but there's something so unifying about that, and something, I don't know.
It's good
wonderful.
that fiction is surviving in an age when, I mean, both of you are involved in documentaries, that's why you're sitting here at this moment, which is non-fiction, and both in publishing and in the film world, there's an increasing trend towards realism, documentary. People want information, they want to know how things were done, and that's what you're doing with your film, and that's what you're doing with your film.
And I wonder what is behind that? You know,
The
is
desire
that,
for information.
well, the desire for information and this kind of idea of, you know,
What you're watching is anchored in a reality somehow.
yeah, and also this other, I mean, obviously the cameras or the impulse to do documentary, I think this age, you know, the past 10 years, and I think what's going on now with cameras and ideas of news, it's the most documented time probably, you know, but there's some kind of impulse to, it feels like to say, we are here, you know? There's something going on about we are here, this is happening, and the idea that, you know, we're interviewing ourselves all over the world, like the flip cameras and the stories that we're telling.
Sure.
There seems to be something psychically about now, and I don't...
People want to record everything on their iPhones or whatever. They want to record the instant moment.
Yeah.
And then
I think
send it around to friends.
What struck me is traveling around and filming in West Africa and Iran and in Calcutta and everything is that how universal this language of film is. You know, despite our cultural differences, and it's easy to discuss the nuance of cultural difference, but the fact that this is a visual language where these children had literally 12 hours before never seen a film, and they just got it. It was the brilliant ease with which you can start to speak this remarkable language of film, which I love, you know, and I think that's why film is so important around the world in our exchanges, and that's back to your Joseph Campbell thing, and those exchanges we make with each other. We recognize each other. We laugh at these children because we recognize ourselves and our kids and everything in them, you know.
And the irony is that although there are Luddites out there who say, oh, well, there's nothing to replace 35mm film and a great camera, in fact, the new technologies are allowing you guys to make films easily, more quickly, less expensively, and in a way to arrive at a better reality, because everything is much easier than it was when you had to set up lights, camera, and the sound was all separate. I mean, it's amazing what's happened in the last 20, 30 years. Right?
It's I disagreed with the gentleman in your film who's saying that democracy makes it worse. Of course, there'll be more films made than ever before, and therefore there will be more rubbish. But there'll also be, if there's a new Francois Truffaut or Claire Denis in this room, or born in a very poor part of the world, they're more likely to be able to get their work on the screen than at any time in movie history, which is a cause for extraordinary celebration, I think.
Mark, the next clip is from your interview with Rod Steiger.
Or if we could skip that if you want. Do you want to skip that and move on to the Japanese one?
Well, in that case, we have to talk some more. Okay, shall we skip the Rod Steiger, skip number 3, and we'll go to number 4, but we'll give you some time to set it up. Is that okay?
Right.
So
I think because that would be, and I could set up the Japanese one. Is that a good idea?
No, it's a bit early.
Okay,
But I'd like you to talk about the reason we were going to show Rod Steiger is that in Scene by Scene, sometimes your subjects got rather riled up. I remember Roman Polanski walked off the set, didn't he?
He stormed off, yeah.
Why? Yeah.
He stormed off because, for a difficult reason. I mean, I'm the opposite of a tabloid interviewer at all. You know, I'm talking about the work. But when you look at his film Macbeth, if you've seen that film Macbeth, that famous line, let grief reign. And of course, he had undergone his extraordinary grief process himself, where his wife and unborn child had been killed by Charles Manson. And and this is a very unusual film for Polanski to make, Macbeth. And so I asked him if and it's extraordinarily pessimistic and wonderful piece of work. And I said, that this must have drawn on your own experience. And he just said to me, monkey see, monkey do, and stormed off. And so I ran after him like a little lapdog saying, oh, Roman, don't go. But then he came back, and the interview was 5.5 hours long, and we had to cut it down to 50 minutes. But we talked, through all that. And at the end, the next day, his agent said, Roman said it went really well, didn't it? And I thought, is that really well, when you storm off?
Mark, hold your thought for a second, because you want now an extract from the story of film, right?
Yes, yeah.
In that case, we have to, I'm sorry, spoil your day again. We want number 6. Number 6. Okay, and we'll talk some more because we had a different order, but you were too busy doing jury duty, so you couldn't go through this. So you're on the jury of the generation this year?
On the jury of the generation, we've seen 12 feature films for young people and 27 shorts. We saw a film from India this morning and one from Indonesia yesterday. Bloody good.
And Keanu, how much time did you have to sacrifice for your career as a major star? You must have agents who surround you and say, well, you're going to do this and then you're going to do that, and you approve a script, and you had to drop all that presumably for a time, or did you somehow dovetail it in?
Yeah, it was terrible. I have to go interview Martin Scorsese. It was really fun, and I'm just really grateful to everyone who said yes and who gave me time and sat with me. I mean, Christopher Nolan was shooting Batman in Los Angeles, and I was speaking to his assistants, and I sent Christopher, because he said he was kind of hard to, so I sent him a typewritten note. I figured since he wasn't digital, he wasn't into the whole world, I have a typewriter, so I typed him a note, and supposedly that helped, that I gave him up. And, but it was, he did that during lunch, while he was filming, so he was, people did that, Martin Scorsese, very busy man, he took some time. James Cameron, it was, well, how about 2:49 p.m. on Thursday? Okay. What about 7:01 on Friday? Sure. The guys are on a plane, but that's okay. They'll come back. How about Monday at 11:01? Okay, we're there. But it was great fun for us, and it's when you're there, and it's just you're just. I mean, you get sometimes you get a little it's like yes, it's just, George Lucas said yes, and then you have the reality, I'm going to interview George Lucas. I'm going to interview Zeus. Okay, what do I say? What do you ask him? Because you don't want George to be like, right? You feel that sometimes, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't want anybody to do that.
Yeah, but that thing, I'm sure with Rod Steiger, right? I know, there's a moment where they look at you and it's like, they can be that moment.
Yeah, and what I found is usually people were very reluctant to be interviewed, but then after about 10 or 15 minutes, once they realized that I knew my stuff, if I went to interview Jack Lemmon and he's made 150 films, I would watch them all. Rod Steiger, I would watch everything, so that is, they can see that quite quickly, and they realize you're not going to ask the same formulaic questions that other people have. And I could always see that moment where people relaxed. And I remember Jack Lemmon saying to his agent, that famous old agent, Warren, somebody in LA, he just said, Warren, you can go home. I'm okay. I'm safe here. And that moment of where the interviewee realizes, okay, I'm safe here.
Relaxes.
I'm not. Yeah. So, and that's what you're looking for, I think.
So maybe if we can have the clip now, if you're already upstairs, can we have the clip from
Could I just say one word of introduction about it? Yeah. Because it's a complicated one. What we've seen so far are roughly what I would call the willing interviewee. Eventually the person agrees to sit down with you and tell you, answer questions. But I wanted to show a bit the most shocking thing I've ever seen, where the interviewee is extremely unwilling. This is
the first part of that clip of the horror film. So we kept the clip of the film in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so we'll see what they come.
Yes, and this is about a man called Mr. Okuzaki, he was Japanese. He fought in World War II. He was in Papua New Guinea at the end of World War II. After the war finished, his friends, fellow soldiers, continued to die, and for nearly 50 years he'd been trying to find out why did they die after World War II. He discovered the most extraordinary fact, that they were killed by their own commanders and eaten by those commanders. One of the most extraordinary things. This is Mr. Okuzaki, if we've got the right bit here, going to meet one of those commanders who has been denying all these years that he cannibalized his former soldiers. The most unwilling thing, he does not want to admit it. The last thing he wants to admit is that he committed this atrocity, and this is how Mr. Okuzaki deals with that.
Okay, let's hope it's...
let's hope it's the right clip. Now we're going to get Rod Steiger, aren't we?
Okay. let's have the clip, please. Life in the raw.
I'm sure I've seen this film maybe 10 times, and each time it makes my heart beat so fast because of the fear, the sense of actually being in that room, but also the reason this is a decent man who's committing a crime against an old gentleman in order to bear witness to the atrocity and to try and put on record on this medium of film this awful event for the Japanese from now on. You know, so the moral complexity of that is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I didn't have any moral complexity.
This whole process of making side by side must have had a certain degree of schadenfreude for you, because you've been interviewed hundreds of thousands of times in your capacity as an actor, and wasn't it nice to be on the other side for a change and to pose the questions rather than having to answer them?
Yes. I'm still in shock and awe right here. So,
So there was no fake. There was no manipulation on your side with that sequence we saw. No.
No, and the reason I put that in the story of film, the reason why I wanted to show it here today is this question of when you're interviewing somebody, to what extent the truth is something that they're happy to reveal to you. Obviously, what you're saying is quite right about the getting in the room at 7:01 with James Cameron, but once you're there, you know, it's that question of Hara Kazuo says sometimes the truth is like an onion. You have to peel away the layers to get down into the subject. And when we're not only going to make films about things that we approve of, but stuff that we disapprove of as well. And I guess that's the most extreme example I know in the whole history of cinema that's an interview, that's an encounter as well. You know. So somewhere we exist somewhere on that spectrum, don't we? In our own interview when we're interviewing ourselves.
We've got a couple more clips before we open it up to Q&A, but the first clip, Keanu, is actually another one from yours. But the trouble is that the clips we got do overlap a bit, so you'll see Scorsese, I think, a second time. But as I recall, they're saying different things. So I think it's worth seeing. It's just a short clip. But could we have number 4, please? I'll give you a minute or two to set it up. Number 4. Side by side. Okay, so going back to that Japanese film, did he ask to see your footage afterwards?
Hara Kazuo?
Yeah.
The filmmaker?
Yeah.
No, he's such a lovely, jolly man, Hara Kazuo, and he came down on the bullet train from to Tokyo, and all we had to do is buy him his lunch, pay his fare or something. And it's funny, I don't know. This question of influence fascinates me, you know, when you see a film, how it affects you. And my films before I saw that one were gentle. And then after I saw this explosive film, it changed my own filmmaking, you know, and that's what's brilliant about seeing other people's work, isn't it? That you can suddenly have a revelation and think, this subject that I've been worried at, been trying to deal with in a certain way, I could deal with it in a new way as a result of seeing something as bold and disconcerting as that.
A question for both of you. How many of your interviewees demand to see what you're going to use? Have you ever had that where someone says, I'll give you the interview, but I want to see what you're going to use?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, we had to sign releases and stuff, but then there were some people who wanted to negotiate the release, and which is fair enough, you know. You want to know the questions beforehand, you know, have a certain kind of control. But then I think, you know, I had that experience where once you get their trust, you know, those kind of fall away.
But certainly two cases come to mind where I used to publish a lot of books on film by other people, and Joseph Losey, for example, and Robert Bresson were both control freaks. They had to see everything, and then they would rewrite everything, and then you'd send it back one more time. Well, now I'm going to rewrite it again. so that the actual interview ended up being completely different to what had been asked by the author.
The only limit we had, we interviewed a wonderful actress, Kyoko Kagawa, who was in 5 Kurosawa pictures. She was in Tokyo Story. She was in the great films of Naruza, one of the legendary actresses. Yeah. She's in her 80s. And she's been interviewed all her life, and she was sick of being interviewed, to be honest. You know, and previously, in a previous encounter, somebody interviewed her for a long time and used a few minutes. So we had to convince her that we would interview her for a reasonable amount of time, and then we would use a lot of it. So we had to see her send the cut to show that she was substantially in it, and she was brilliant, and of course she was substantially in it, and so she was pleased, it turns out. But that was the only limitation that I think that we encountered, apart from the releases, of course. Is that right, John? I can't think of any other.
Could we have the next clip, number 4, if you've got that ready, please? We saw David Lynch in this perfect setting. It was like a scene from Mulholland Drive, you know.
Well, he said he was in, he said, don't hold me to it, Keanu, but I think I am. Through with film. Yeah. Which was really surprising.
He's into painting more now, isn't he, David Lynch?
Yeah, painting and film and TM. And
Far out.
Big TM.
Yeah. It's David Lynch, man. I mean, it's awesome.
So we'll give the guys a chance to prepare just one more clip, which we definitely haven't seen, and that is number 5. Number 5. And number 5 is actually a film you made a long time ago. It's called Another Journey by Train, right? 92, 93?
Yes, a long time ago. I made this film immediately after seeing the Japanese film. I had wanted to do something about neo-Nazis, young people my age who just seemed to be impervious to the truth of what had happened. And I'd been trying to think of a way of making a film about neo-Nazis. Then I saw Emperor's Naked Army Marches On. I rest assured I do not beat them up on camera, the neo-Nazis. But what we decided to do was take a bunch of them from across Europe, tell them we were coming here to Berlin to talk about what they call nationalism, and what we call something else, obviously. But we were in fact taking them onto Auschwitz-Birkenau to show them the atrocities that they deny the existence of. So I think the scene
to meet
people who were there. A brilliant woman called Kitty Hart, who had been in Birkenau too, and I mean, it's hard to speak about. But I think the scene we've got here, the reason why I wanted to show it is this is an encounter between the neo-Nazis and a wonderful historian called Marian Dworsky, who was in Auschwitz-Birkenau and who lost most of his family. And I wanted to show this clip in a way to try and illustrate the occasion where they're standing together, they're not beating each other up. Marian Dworsky is such a lovely man, so it's a willing encounter in some way, but in fact, they are unprepared to accept some basic things. So it's almost like a balance between people trying to interviewing each other, but pulling back from it. This is the scene.
And you took each of the 4 guys from different countries in Europe?
Yes, one was from Scotland, one neo-Nazi from Scotland, one from France, one from Germany, and one from Austria.
You have neo-Nazis in Scotland?
We do indeed. We're such a lucky people.
Are we ready up there for that clip?
And in this scene, we've just come off the train in Auschwitz, and we're
I hope, because we had to shorten it slightly, so we'll see.
Who knows?
Yeah. Kind of abridged, I'm sorry, but I would like to see the woman too, was great in that film. It's a very powerful film. In fact, it was so powerful that in my hotel room I watched the whole thing, you see, right to the end.
Yes.
Well, we're going to open it up to Q&A now, because I know there are lots of you who will want to ask questions. So we'll have as many as we can until we have to break at 1:45 sharp. And how it works is that we have staff here who will pass a mic to you. Please don't start talking until you have a mic in your hand, because you will not be recorded for posterity. So who's got the first question? Who's got the first mic?
Hi.
Yeah, okay, do you want to say who you are?
I would like to talk to Keanu. It's me, Diogo.
From Brazil!
Oh! me and a friend have a gift to give to you. Can we...
Wait.
We do it afterwards. What's
Sure, Matt.
okay? Okay, oh, it's a small one.
Thais, get it up.
Yeah, you came from Brazil. Okay. What is it? What do we got going
It's
on
a
here?
movie that I made in Brazil.
It's a movie you made.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, thank you.
Do we have a question?
No. I already did.
No, but can you pass the mic to someone with a question, please? More questions? More. Oh my goodness.
I think this is another present for you.
Yesterday I gave you in the wall.
Oh, yeah, I read that. Yeah.
And you took two pictures. This is from Moscow.
Oh, okay.
This respect and love for you. From our studio movie.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
Thank you very much.
I actually have a question up here.
Great.
What, no gifts?
Hello, here, up here. To the left. Here you go. It's a question to Mr. Reeves about the movie Side by Side. I haven't seen it, but I think it arises, or the question arises, whether digital filmmaking actually changed the way of storytelling, or actually changed the way you originate movies from. And from your elaboration, from the work on your movie, did you get an answer to that?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell if it quote unquote changed cinema. Lars von Trier spoke about the hope that with these digital cameras that the language of cinema would open up. He basically said, I hope that people will say fuck you to film school and all that shit and make movies. And Michael Chapman, the cinematographer, was like, I hope people do some extreme things with it. He was like, who cares if it's digital? And Michael Ballhaus was saying it doesn't matter what you use, as long as you follow your heart and your thought and your passion. Which is wise. And I think actually the thing that struck me the most was through it, using the medium to whatever you use for image acquisition or however you manipulate. But the biggest thing, one of the things was just the changing way that we watch movies. The idea of the big screen, the idea of going to the cinema. How we're watching films now, how we're seeing stories, is actually a big evolution as well.
Another question?
My question, hello. My question is for Mark, over here.
Oh, hi.
Hi. You mentioned that there were sort of distinctive styles in the West and the East, the West very much talking heads, and the East about putting a camera on a group of people. And I was quite intrigued with the clip you just showed of that situation, where you basically just let them have the conversation. What's your preferred style, or do you have one?
Yeah, I prefer not to. Do you mean in terms of interviewing or more general?
Yeah, because I think, for instance, I saw Side by Side last night, and one of the reasons that really worked for me is because it was more of a conversation, because obviously Keanu has a very intimate knowledge of the subject matter.
Yeah.
So, but for you as the filmmaker, do you prefer that more intimate one-on-one situation, or is there something magical, a waiting for a magic moment when you're watching other people do it for you?
Yeah, I prefer the latter. I prefer not to be close if possible. I prefer just to these tableau shots almost, and watch the interaction within the frame. Sometimes pitching in from outside, just to try and sort of make a little crackle or something, but much prefer to be back and let the, Bertolucci had this lovely phrase, let the unpredictable reality enter into the scene. I always say that when I'm making documentaries, I'm not directing, I'm co-directing with life and everyday events and what is going to happen anyway, So I prefer that detached, unassertive way of making films. I don't like to kind of master the scene and force it into a certain shape. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Another one?
I have a question. It's working? Yeah. I have two questions, one for each.
Here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of very short. Well, first questions. You made a film interviewing very famous people that you have met before. So you were in a situation that maybe others would be. Are you planning or thinking to go and interview people like the kind of films you have done, that you have never met, that they are not famous, or?
I don't know. Why do I feel like I have to have a disclaimer? I also, you know, part of the sections that we have here is we also. Actually, I'm not even going to do the disclaimer. Not right now. I think you have to have a storyteller or a reason to go do what you do. And right now, I don't have another documentary situation or another idea or feeling to want to go pursue that. Right now, I'm just hoping to do a kung fu movie in China.
But I have many ideas, documentaries. we can.
Well, then, you know what? You know, you could go do it.
I have.
Great. I mean, that's the great thing. Yeah.
What was your question for Mark?
Yes. The question for you is, well, I happen to live for I'm from Chile originally, and I'm Jewish as well. To live for a couple of years in the Channel Islands and with the British culture there. And I was really shocked by the obsession with the Second World War and bringing these topics up. And there are so many other topics that are very, like the Brits have done in other places of the world, that can be really critical. And why did you also choose a Second World War topic rather than other topic?
The theme of this film really was about people who are impervious to the truth rather than the Second World War. When I was 18, I read Martin Gilbert's History of the Holocaust, and that, for me, I feel the moment when I grew up, and therefore I wanted to make something about that. Where I lived in Scotland, I saw the swastika on graffiti on the walls, and I thought there's something wrong here. So that's why I wanted to make the film about that. It's the only time I've touched the subject of World War II, so I'm not obsessed by it, I promise.
Another question?
Hi, this question is for Keanu. Keanu, you've worked with some great, I'm up here on the balcony. You've worked with some great directors in your career. Do you see any similarities between director working with actor and then interviewer working with subject?
Interviewer working with subject. What do you mean?
Oh, the interviewer and the interviewee.
The interviewer and interviewee and the director-actor relationship.
Yeah, did you feel any
similarities between those
or
parallels with that? There's two people. And they speak to each other, generally about a common idea, and hopefully you have consent. Well, you don't need consensus. Yeah, I think one of the similar investigation. Maybe it's about investigation and being in the moment, and either with the thoughtfulness and then the inquiry, and then what's going to happen.
I have a question. Yeah. I'm here on the balcony. Here. I would like to ask you where? Can you see that?
No, we can't see. We know we can't see. We've told them yesterday, but they can't. We have lights which obscure the...
Okay. Way up in the very, very top.
No, I didn't see the documentary about digital future of cinema, and I would like to know concerning the democratization of filmmaking. What is the vision of you and the position you two are now? What do you propose young filmmakers? Where do you see the future of documentaries with digital cinema? And what can you propose?
Mark, you want to take that?
Especially in Germany, we are really dependent on film funding, and if we are from film schools, so, and we need a lobby. So I would like to, you know what I mean?
I'm wholly, passionately for digital. I think it has increased not only the democracy that we've talked about several times, but it also has given more variety to the aesthetics. You can film for a long time now without having to change mag, etc. So I'm wholly for it, right through to the projected process. So I'm worried about the theme that you were talking about how to store material with some kind of permanence in an archive sense. But I just think bring it on as fast as possible. My new film, which is 76 minutes, is shot entirely with a flip camera, and just me, so I just love it.
May I, like, now jump in down here, like to your right, here?
Wave.
No, this right. Hi. Finally, I'm so excited.
It's our left.
It's the left.
I don't really care about like your sides. I'm like all thinking about like where I'm sitting, like for myself.
So what's your question?
Well, my question is, yeah, there was a question, but no, the question is when you look at documentary films, like historically interviewing people on screen, this has like a very long, rich tradition. But there's also like two very different approaches. There's the filmmaker or interviewer who's also to be seen on screen, and then there's, in a slightly more verite style, the filmmaker or interviewer who's strictly off-screen all the time. So like the difference between what like early 60s US documentary filmmaking and say Morgan Spurlock or Michael Moore film. And having seen side by side, Keanu, you are actually like on screen a lot, which I in itself don't think is a bad thing. But was that like a choice that was made from the get-go, or were you more like, I don't know, feeling better about the film as such, being there on screen as well? I mean, was it like a process or like an early on decision?
The early on decision was that I would be the, I was the interviewer, and wanted to be inclusive in the environment of because the director, Chris, didn't really want to have, we are presenting our subject and they are speaking. You know, we wanted to have a dialogue and wanted to be a part of that, and I placed myself next to the camera, and that was my position. And in terms of being inclusive in it, I think it was part of the exchanges was always a part of the idea of what the other person was saying. You know, it was just about how the back and forth of that, and hopefully that was and is interesting to people, that they're, you know, that the spontaneity of it, etc.
Were you on camera in Scene by Scene? I've forgotten now.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, I said, but since you've tended to be...
Yeah, I prefer to be off. We had two cameras in Scene by Scene, one permanently on the interviewee, the other was on a track, and so it moved between a two-shot of me and the interviewee, and then it would track round to this screen that we hung. So I would be on screen maybe 10% of the time or something like that. It was, you're quite right, we wanted to show a sense of a relationship building and the kind of emerging warmth, or occasionally otherwise, of the encounter. So we wanted to capture some of that, but I was never all that comfortable on screen, and so I tried to get off as much as possible. You know. I was just thinking there, and I'm sure many of you know this great documentary called Marlene. Do you remember this one, Peter, about Marlene Dietrich, where what's the name of the German actor who did it? Yes. Maximilian Schell went and interviewed Marlene Dietrich, but when he got there, she would only let him do it in sound. So he gets a sound interview and then thinks, fuck, this is a film, what do I need? I need imagery. So he recreates her apartment in the studio and then tracks round with the camera. And that detachment, her very visual absence, made it one of the great interview films, I thought.
Another question?
Up here, balcony, on your right.
Right, okay.
Up here, balcony on your right.
Okay, yeah.
Question for Mark. You did interviews with a lot of professionals who are used to be in front of the camera, but also with ordinary people. And how do you win that trust and let them forget the camera, because my experience is that they always, I have to behave, I'm in front of the camera, I have to talk properly. How do you make that?
Reduce the technology, the equipment as much as possible. Don't use light. I hardly ever use lights, for example. The great Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami says that when you're making a film, you're really like the football manager of a football team. You try to arrange a situation, but then it just has to go and you stay on the sidelines. And so that's what I try to do where possible. When you're working with children, it's an extra problem, but it's also more fun. The very first thing that I did with the children was jump in the river with the camera, just to show to them that it was expendable and it wasn't this precious thing that you had to be scared of. And then we treated it just as a toy. So to maximize the degree of play, I'm sure it's the same when you're acting, Keanu, to maximize the degree of play and freedom and to make the process invisible as much as possible really helped to put people at their ease, I think.
Do you spend also time with them without the camera a lot?
Yes, lots of time. Usually drinking wine if it's an adult. or playing football or something if it's a child.
Another question? No?
I'm Yvette from Budapest, and I'd like also to give at first a small gift to Keanu from Hungary. Please, could you help me to give it to me? Because I don't want to go out. So. Okay. And I have also a question for both. So we know that today a resolution of picture is raising very quickly up in digital films. So, and we can watch film now on a big movie screen, and also how we saw yesterday in Side by Side that in small smartphones. And it's possible also to watch 3 dimensions videos on smartphones today as well. So my question is that what do you think that in future the film industry will go in which way? That focus still on the big screens, and by the way it will be possible to watch it on smartphones, or maybe will be some type of films exactly made digital for smartphones. So this was my question. Thank you.
I think to watch a film that was made for cinema on a smartphone is absolute nuts.
Yeah. Hear, hear.
To see a film like Lawrence of Arabia or My Own Private Idaho on a phone would just be silly. Yeah. However, I do think that your question is a good one. It's about how we organize future experiences of watching movies. I always like to think of what happens in the Islamic world. You have your prayer mat at home and you say your prayers on that mat, and I think that's the equivalent of people with the TV and the Blu-ray player and the nice sound system at home. But also you have the Friday mosque where you go to have a collective experience, and that's where we come to beautiful theatres like this. I think there'll always be need for the Friday mosque in the future of movie-going, as well as our own private prayer mats where we watch our favourite films at home.
I wonder though, in how far, when we push the idea of the future, you know, if that future is 10 years, or if we talk about that future in 15 years, or 25 years.
Matrix future.
Yeah, I mean, because that communal space is going to be able to be, you know, you'll be able to sensorially feel like you're in a communal space.
Absolutely. When I saw Inception, do you remember the end of Inception where they wake up in an airplane and they've all been dreaming together and dreams within dreams? That, I think, could be like the far future of cinema, where we could all sit, come and fall asleep together and have incredible sensory experiences and then all wake up. And we've just been doing it all together, so to speak, you know.
Let's read Chinese.
Do you think the Hollywood studios can sell off the real estate because they won't need these huge sound stages anymore?
Yeah, I think Hollywood is going to do what they do, which is they provide resources to one aspect of it is they have the resources to distribute films on a certain level, which of course when you could counter with, well, the internet or other means of distribution. But they also have the resources to create fantastical worlds, you know, and the scale of production is something that they can offer. You know, we can all say, well, it usually sucks, but sometimes they do it all right, you know, and sometimes there's some really spectacular films that can come from the resources and the artists that work there. I think the other thing that might happen too is that the scale of these independent films or the films that we're making will be able to be projected in a big way. You know, because of the 4K projectors or 2K projectors that, you know, some flip phones or HD, you know, you're gonna be able to, like, you know, have your backyard kind of like, look at the movie I made, and it's gonna be that size on a sheet.
Crystal clear.
And it'll be 2K, which is a movie that you're going to go watch today and pay, you know, 12 euros for. And that's kind of cool, too.
Another question?
Up here on the balcony.
Hello, my name is...
Sorry.
It's my turn, I'm sorry.
No, we have to hold the balcony just for a second. Come next, this lady.
Thank you. My name is Anna Ehret. I met you, Keanu, last time on the press conference for the film The Private Life of Pipali, and it was for 2 years ago, and I'm very glad to see you again here. Thank you this film, and thank you, Chris, for this film. It was very interesting for me because I'm studying film and making films, and you know, when watching films, I caught myself by thinking that I'm analyzing, you know. So I'm thinking, okay, the film director said to actor, do this, and the cameraman was here, and it was this shot, and how do you watch films? You think also in this way sometimes, and what should a film, like in what way should it be done that you let carry you away in his world? You know, some reality world.
Yeah, how do you watch? You know, how do you watch? I mean, that's a
do you watch a lot of movies?
I love movies. I love movies, and I love to be able to just to sit and just let it happen. You know, one of the things that I'm trying to do more and more is let films exist on their level. No, and I don't mean level's the wrong word, or terms. Let it come, you know, not say, well, they should have done, and how come they didn't? Because they didn't. You know, they made that film in that way. That doesn't mean not to be critical or to think, but then there's also ways to watch things where you know, what is the editing style, or how are they framing, or in these kinds of ways, or with some of the mechanistic aspects of storytelling. So there's different ways to watch, but my favorite is to be, you know,
immersed. And Mark, when you were choosing films for Edinburgh, how in those days, how did you watch a film? How did you?
Very similar to how Keanu's describing. I feel I watch as a child, and then once the film's over, you start to use my adult brain to sort of think, what was that? You know, and sitting in the children's jury here, sitting in an audience of 800 children watching a film, and they cheer when the lights go down. That sense of wonder and enchantment, which, if you fall in love with cinema as a child, is the reason that you're there in the first place. I still have that. So my answer to your question would be watch as a child and then think about it afterwards.
Well, we have that question.
Yes.
The question up in the balcony, and that must be the last one, I'm afraid.
Hi, I have a question for Mark.
Oh, yes.
I'm Amar.
Hi.
Yes, hi. I'm a documentary filmmaker from Pakistan.
Oh, yes.
So I wanted to ask you, when you go and work in a different society with different language, different culture, how do you deal with the obstacles, in terms of communication? And how much time did you spend in Iraq? And another part of the same question, that do you think in order to communicate properly with those, I mean, when you have a translator, that there's something missing, and how do you deal with that? Because I'm really concerned about this, because my first feature is going to be a film about DDR and how the fall changed our lives of Pakistani communists. So, you know, and I don't speak German, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult, you know. It depends what your subject is. And when you're working with kids, sometimes it isn't so important what they say. It's more physical than that, and so that's easy, you know. But I always work with a translator, of course, and always have the translator when we're filming at my ear, whispering all the time, etc. You know, you spend as much time as possible before you start filming, getting to know the place. But the kind of difference that you describe, you find it when I go and film in Los Angeles, for example. It's a massive cultural difference, even though we speak the same language. There are so many differences between people who are living in Los Angeles and me in my life. So you're all, one of the purposes of the documentary mode is to jump into something that you don't well know and then try to capture that in some way. So it's especially if you're making something about the DDR and it's if it's word-based, you know, if it's very much, if it's a historical piece about what happened and you have to understand precisely what people are saying, that is tough. So that relationship with your translator is so crucial. But I know, I'm sure that doesn't help you, but get the right translator and work out a system of either simultaneous in your ear or stop-start, whichever works for you.
Have you ever had a case where a translator has deliberately, out of embarrassment, particularly say in Japan, not quite translated?
I had a thing where a translator in China said to me, I hope it wasn't about us, she was describing an experience where the European person made a joke and in front of a big audience, and she said to the audience in Chinese, the foreigner just made a joke. I did not understand the joke, but please laugh.
So, Keanu, you interviewed some, you mentioned Lars von Trier. Were there other European directors and foreign directors you interviewed for Side by Side?
Yeah, we started to, when we began, we were hoping to go a little more international than we ended up going. I mean, we have with the cinematographers and with the directors, so we did do that, but I mean, with the, I was hoping to go to India and go to Japan and go to China, and so I think that's going to have to be the next documentary.
Could be, okay. Okay, perhaps one more question and then that's it. Who's got the mic? Who's got the mic? Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry for my voice again. First of all, I'm visiting the festival from Turkey, and I brought the guests 2 small gifts, if I just quickly give them to you. Sorry. Could I just, because one is for Mark and the other is for... Could I just give them... This is
Turkish Delight, how lovely. Thank you.
Turkish Delight.
Turkish Delight.
And this is for
awesome.
Keanu.
Okay, thank you.
This is a traditional good luck charm and 2 fine examples of Turkish cinema. I'm not sure if you ever watched Turkish movies. And I have a very quick...
We'll share.
Yes, please. First of all...
Oh, yes.
Yep, one question.
One question. First, I would like to wish Keanu best of luck in Men of Tai Chi. I'm a great fan of your work, and I'm very excited about your directorial debut. And after watching Side by Side and seeing you interviewing all of these great directors, have you ever, think about what kind of a director you would like to be? What you would like to achieve in your first movie as a director? Do you have a,
That's a great final question. Into the unknown. Yeah.
Into the unknown. I think I want to make and hope I get the best out of the actors that I work with. I hope that I help, and I hope that I put them in the right situations and don't get in their way, or can help and try and tell the, for the film, an honest truth, and I hope I put the camera in the right place.
Do you have a good script?
And we have a great script.
There you go. That's okay. Well, Keanu Reeves, Mark Cousins, thank you so much for taking time to come down here. Great.
Thank you.